They say a bullet doesn't ask for a name before it tears through you. It doesn't care if you are a sinner or a saint. But that night in the VIP section of Chicago's most exclusive club, the bullet was meant for the devil himself. It was meant for Lorenzo Moretti, the capo, who ruled the city with iron and blood. Instead, it found her. A broke waitress nobody noticed. A woman who had every reason to run, but chose to dive in front of a loaded gun. Why? Because of what was standing behind him. This is the true story of how Andrew Brooks took a hollow point meant for a mafia king, and how that one split-second decision exposed a derail deep inside of the family. You think you know romance. You think you know loyalty. Wait until you hear the truth about the angel of the underworld. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was a Thursday night in late October, the kind of bone-deep cold that bypassed skin and settled directly into the marrow. Andrew Brooks adjusted the collar of her cheap polyester coat as she hurried down West Randolph Street. She was late. Again. The wind whipped her chestnut hair across her face, stinging her eyes, but she didn't have a free hand to brush it away. Her left hand clutched a shattered umbrella, and her right gripped a coffee thermos that doubled as her lifeline. Andrew was 24, but the dark circles under her hazel eyes said 30. She was a ghost in a city of loud noises, invisible, overworked and drowning in the medical debt left behind by a mother who had passed 3 months ago. She pushed through the heavy oak service doors of the Obsidian Room. It wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of wealth. Velvet booths, dim lighting that cost more than her rent, and a clientele that treated $100 bills like napkins. "You're cutting it close, Brooks," the floor manager Davis hissed. He was a weasel of a man with too much hair gel and a fake tan that looked orange under the kitchen fluorescence. "Bus broke down on State Street," Andrew muttered, stripping off her coat to reveal the crisp white button-down and black slacks required for service. "I'm here. I'm ready." "You better be. We have the VIP balcony booked out. The whole balcony. Private party. You and Kowalski are on rotation. Keep your head down. Keep the glasses full, and for the love of God, do not speak unless spoken to." Andrew nodded, tying her apron tight. She knew what private party meant at the Obsidian Room. It meant the people who owned the politicians. It meant heavy men with heavy rings and heavier secrets. By 8:00 p.m., the atmosphere in the club had shifted. The air grew thick, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on Andrew's arms stand up. Then they entered. It wasn't a loud entrance. True power doesn't need to shout. 6 men in tailored Italian suits moved in a phalanx formation. They scanned the room with predatory efficiency, checking exits, checking faces, checking hands. In the center of the formation walked Lorenzo Moretti. Andrew had seen his face on the news, usually accompanied by words like alleged investigation and acquitted. He was taller than he looked on TV, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of a charcoal Brioni suit. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. He was terrifying. But what stopped Andrew in her tracks, causing her to freeze with a tray of crystal tumblers in her hand, was what he was holding. Or rather, who he was holding. Clinging to his left hand was a small boy, maybe 5 years old, wearing a miniature blazer. In his right arm he carried a sleeping girl, the boy's identical twin, her head resting on the shoulder of the most dangerous man in Illinois. "Table 1 is cleared," Davis whispered frantically, shoving Andrew forward. "Go. Water. Sparkling. Now!" Andrew moved on autopilot. She ascended the spiral stairs to the VIP balcony. The security guard's massive walls of muscle, named things like Tiny or Butch, blocked her path. One pat down later, she was allowed into the inner sanctum. Lorenzo sat at the head of the long mahogany table. The twins were seated on either side of him. The rest of his men stood at the perimeter facing outward. This wasn't a dinner. It was a siege. Andrew approached the table, her hands trembling slightly. She poured the sparkling water into the crystal flute in front of Lorenzo. He didn't look at her. He was busy typing on an encrypted phone, his brow furrowed in a mixture of rage and exhaustion. "Daddy, I dropped turbo," the little boy whispered. Lorenzo stopped typing. He looked down. A small plastic action figure lay under the table near Andrew's shoe. The tension in the room spiked. 2 guards reached for their jackets. Andrew didn't think. She just reacted. She knelt gracefully, not like a servant, but like a sister or a teacher. She picked up the toy, a beat-up red superhero, and wiped a speck of dust off its cape. "He looks like he took a tumble," Andrew said, softly, handing the toy back to the boy. She smiled a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "But heroes always get back up, right?" The boy. Leo looked at her with wide eyes. Then he looked at his father. Lorenzo Moretti slowly turned his head. For the first time, he looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the frayed cuffs of her shirt, the fatigue in her eyes, and the impossible gentleness of her smile in a room filled with killers. "What is your name?" Lorenzo asked. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "Andrew, sir," she replied, standing up and stepping back. "Andrew." He tested the name. "You are not afraid. I'm afraid of spilling this water on a $5,000 suit, sir," she deflected. A corner of Lorenzo's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Go. Bring the kids pasta. Plain. Butter only." Andrew turned to leave. She felt a strange pull, a gravity she couldn't explain. She hurried to the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He spoke to you?" Davis asked, eyes wide, as she plated the pasta. "Moretti never speaks to the staff." "He just ordered food for his kids," Andrew said, dismissing it. But her hands were shaking. She didn't know that outside a black van had just pulled up to the rear alley. She didn't know that the kitchen porter, a new hire named Greg, was currently unlocking the back service door. And she certainly didn't know that the man sitting at the head of the table had a bounty on his head of $10 million, effective as of midnight. Andrew grabbed the tray with the kids' pasta. She took a deep breath. She had to get through this shift. Then she could go home, sleep for 4 hours, and start all over again. She pushed through the swinging doors, stepping back into the lion's den. The balcony was quieter now. The ambient guitars from the main floor drifted up, masking the low conversations of Lorenzo's lieutenants. The little girl, Mia, was awake now, rubbing her eyes and coloring on a napkin. Andrew placed the bowls of pasta down. "Butter only. Extra parmesan on the side, just in case." Lorenzo looked up from his phone. He looked tired. Not the tired of a double shift, but the tired of a man who hasn't slept without a weapon in his hand for a decade. "Thank you," he murmured. It happened in slow motion. Andrew was backing away. Her eyes caught a movement in the mirrored reflection of the bar behind Lorenzo. It was the service door, the one only staff used. It cracked open. A man stepped out. It wasn't a waiter. He wore the uniform, but the fit was wrong. and in his hand, held low against his thigh, was a matte black pistol with a suppressor screwed onto the barrel. He wasn't aiming at Lorenzo. Lorenzo was screened by his bodyguard, a giant named Rocco. The gunman raised the weapon. He was aiming at the gap between the chairs. He was aiming at Leo. The realization hit Andrew like a physical blow. They aren't trying to kill the king. They are trying to break him by killing the heir. Lorenzo was looking down at his phone. Rocco was scanning the main floor below. No one saw the waiter but Andrew. "No!" Andrew screamed. The sound tore through the sophisticated silence of the club. She didn't run away. She lunged. She threw herself across the few feet of space separating her from the twins. She didn't think about her debt, her empty apartment, or her fear. She just saw a child about to die. Pop. Pop. Two sounds like champagne corks, but flatter. Mina. Andrew felt a sledgehammer hit her right shoulder. The force spun her around. She crashed into the table, shattering crystal and china. A second impact hit her side, burning like a hot poker. She collapsed on top of Leo and Mia, covering their small bodies with her own. "Get down!" she gasped, blood already frothing at her lips. Chaos erupted. Lorenzo moved with terrifying speed. He didn't check the shooter. His men were already turning the fake waiter into a sieve of bullet holes. Lorenzo flipped the heavy mahogany table on its side, creating a barricade. "Leo, Mia!" Lorenzo roared, his voice cracking with a panic the world had never heard from him. "We're okay, Daddy," Leo cried, his voice muffled by Andrew's uniform. The lady fell on us." Lorenzo grabbed Andrew by her good arm and dragged her behind the cover of the overturned table. The room was filled with the smell of cordite and screaming patrons from the floor below. He looked at her. The white shirt was now soaked in a dark, spreading crimson stain. Her eyes were unfocused, glazing over. "You," Lorenzo stammered, his hands pressing down on her shoulder wound. "Why?" Andrew coughed, a spray of red speckling Lorenzo's pristine shirt. She looked past him at the terrified twins huddled in the corner of the barricade. Are they okay?" she whispered. Lorenzo looked at his children. They were covered in pasta and terrified, but unharmed. Not a scratch. He looked back at the waitress. This nobody. This stranger. She was bleeding out on a parquet floor for children she didn't know. "They are safe," Lorenzo said, his voice fierce. "Stay with me, Andrew. Do not close your eyes." "It burns," she murmured. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, numbing darkness. "Tell Mr. Henderson I'll have the rent on Tuesday." Her head lolled back. "Rocco!" Lorenzo screamed, turning to his head of security. "Forget the ambulance. They'll finish the job in transit. Bring the SUV around the back. We're going to the safe house. Call Dr. Vanko. Tell him if she dies, he dies." Lorenzo scooped Andrew up in his arms. She was impossibly light. He held her close against his chest, feeling the weak flutter of her heart. He ignored the chaos around him. He ignored the dead assassin on the floor. He marched down the back stairs, his face a mask of cold fury. He had expected betrayal tonight. He had expected violence, but he hadn't expected this. He looked down at the woman in his arms. Her blood was soaking into his skin, binding them together in a way no contract or oath ever could. He didn't know who she was, not really. But as he kicked open the back doors into the pouring rain, Lorenzo Moretti knew one thing for certain. He was going to burn the city to the ground to find who did this. And if this woman survived, she was never going back to waiting tables. "Drive!" he barked at the driver, jumping into the back of the armored Cadillac Escalade, still cradling Andrew like she was the most precious thing in his empire. "Drive like the devil is chasing us." The engine roared, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. As the car sped away into the Chicago night, Andrew's hand went limp, slipping from her stomach to hang lifelessly off the seat. Lorenzo grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. "Not today, Angel," he whispered. "You don't get to die today." Pain was the first thing Andrew knew. It wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was a heavy, dull throb that pulsed in time with the beeping of a machine somewhere to her left. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt like they were weighted with lead. The smell hit her next antiseptic, mixed with the faint, expensive scent of leather and sandalwood. This wasn't a hospital. Hospitals smelled like bleach and despair. This smelled like money. "She's stabilizing," a gravelly voice said. The bullet in the shoulder passed through clean. The one in the side, that was messy. Nicked the liver. "I stitched it, but she needs rest, Lorenzo. Serious rest." "Will she live, Vanko?" "She's tough. Malnourished, stressed, but tough." "Yeah, she'll live, unless you scare her to death." Andrew forced her eyes open. The light was dim, coming from a recessed chandelier in the ceiling. She wasn't in a ward. She was in a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. The walls were paneled in dark wood, and she was lying in a bed with sheets that felt like spun silk. She tried to sit up, but a gasp of agony tore from her throat. "Don't," the voice commanded. Lorenzo Moretti stepped out of the shadows. He had shed his ruined jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and inked with faint, faded scars. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were alert, predatory. He walked to the side of the bed. He didn't look like a worried father anymore. He looked like the capo of Chicago. "Water," Andrew croaked. Lorenzo poured a glass from a crystal pitcher on the nightstand. He held it to her lips, tilting it gently. For a man who killed people for a living, his hands were surprisingly steady. Where am I?" she whispered, the water soothing her parched throat. "My home," Lorenzo said. "Or one of them. The one where people don't find us." Andrew's memories came rushing back. The club, the gun, the twins, the kids. She panicked, ignoring the pain, to try and sit up again. The boy, Leo, and Mia. Lorenzo placed a hand on her uninjured shoulder, pushing her back down. His touch was firm, leaving no room for argument. "They are sleeping. Safe. Because of you." He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. He studied her face intensely, as if trying to solve a complex equation. "Now tell me the truth, Andrew," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Who sent you?" Andrew blinked, confused. "What?" "The waiter who shot you," Lorenzo said, calmly. "He was a pro. Cartel-trained, maybe former Spetsnaz. He got into my club past my security. And you? A waitress who can't pay her rent? Just happened to be standing there, just happened to react faster than my head of security." He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "Nobody is that selfless, Andrew. Not in my world. Did the Romano send you? Was this a setup? A save the kids routine to get you inside my house?" Andrew stared at him. The drugs in her system made her woozy, but the accusation cut through the fog like a knife. She had taken 2 bullets. She had almost died. And he was interrogating her. A spark of anger flared in her chest, hot enough to rival the pain in her side. "You think—" She had to stop to breathe. "You think I took a bullet?" "As a strategy." "People have done worse for less money," Lorenzo said coldly. Andrew let out a dry, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. She winced, tears pricking her eyes. "I don't know who the Romanos are. I don't know who you are, other than the guy who tips well." She looked him dead in the eye. "I saw a gun. I saw a kid. I moved. If that's too complicated for you to understand, maybe you've been living in the dark too long." Lorenzo didn't blink. He held her gaze for a long, stretching silence. He was looking for the lie. He was looking for the flicker of deceit he had seen in 1,000 men before they begged for mercy. He found nothing but exhaustion and honest younger. The door opened. A man entered, shorter than Lorenzo, bald, with glasses and a stethoscope around his neck. "Dr. Vanko." "Pressure is rising, Lorenzo," Vanko warned, checking the monitors. "She needs sleep, not an interrogation. If she pops a stitch, I'm not fixing it again tonight." Lorenzo stood up slowly. The coldness in his face fractured just for a second, revealing something else. Confusion. Gratitude. It was gone before Andrew could place it. "Rest," Lorenzo commanded. "We will talk when you are lucid." "I want to go home," Andrew whispered, her energy fading fast. "You can't," Lorenzo said, walking to the door. "The man who shot you is dead, but the man who paid him is still out there. You're a loose end now, Andrew. You're a witness. If you leave this house, you'll be dead in an hour." He paused at the door, his hand on the brass handle. He didn't look back. "Welcome to the family, Miss Brooks." The door clicked shut, locking her in. 3 days passed. Andrew drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in a haze of fever and painkillers. When she finally woke up properly on the 4th morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight streamed through the heavy velvet curtains. She was propped up on pillows. Her side felt stiff and sore, but the burning fire was gone. The door opened, but it wasn't Lorenzo. It was a giant of a man with a thick neck and a nose that had been broken at least twice. Rocco. She remembered him from the club. He carried a tray with toast fruit and coffee. He set it down on the bedside table with surprising delicacy. "Boss says eat," Rocco grunted. "I'm not hungry," Andrew said, though her stomach rumbled traitorously. "Boss says eat," Rocco repeated, as if that settled the laws of physics. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder. He tossed it onto the bedspread near her feet. "What's this, your life?" Rocco said. "Boss had me dig deep." Andrew picked up the folder with her good hand. She opened it. It was terrifying. It had everything. Her birth certificate, her high school transcripts, her mother's death certificate from 3 months ago. It had copies of her overdue notices, her eviction warning, her bank statement showing a balance of $12.40. But it was the second page that made her blood run cold. It was a police report from 5 years ago. Arthur Brooks, deceased, ruled suicide. "Your dad," Rocco said, watching her reaction closely. "Baker. Had a shop on 4th Street. Nice place. Borrowed 50 grand from a loan shark to expand the kitchen. Couldn't pay the vig. 2 weeks later, he jumps off a bridge." Andrew slammed the folder shut. Her hands were shaking not from weakness, but from rage. "Get out," she hissed. "The shark who squeezed him." Rocco continued, ignoring her. "His name was Joey the Knuckles Gambino, low-level enforcer." "I said get out," Andrew yelled, throwing the folder at him. Papers scattered across the floor. "Gambino worked for the Romanos." Rocco set his voice level. "Not us. Not Moretti. Andrew froze. She looked at the giant man. It's all the same, she spat. You wear suits, you carry guns, and you ruin people who are just trying to survive. You think I care which family it was? You're all monsters. The door opened again. This time, Lorenzo stood there. He had heard. Rocco looked at his boss, gave a small nod, and bent down to pick up the papers. She's clean, boss. She hates us. But she's clean. Lorenzo walked into the room. He was dressed immaculately in a navy suit, looking like he was about to merge a corporation, not order a hit. He waited until Rocco left the room. I'm sorry about your father, Lorenzo said. It wasn't an apology for the act, but an acknowledgement of the loss. Don't pretend you care. Andrew turned her head away, looking out the window. I saved your kids because they are innocent, not because I like you. As soon as I can walk, I'm leaving. You can't leave, Lorenzo said, stepping closer to the bed. The word is out on the street. They are calling you the Angel of the Obsidian, or the woman who took a bullet for the Moretti heirs. To my enemies, that makes you a target. To my friends, that makes you a curiosity. I didn't ask for this. No, you didn't. But you chose it when you jumped, Lorenzo said. And now I owe you a debt. A Moretti always pays his debts. I don't want your money. I'm not offering money. I'm offering protection. Before Andrew could argue, a small commotion came from the hallway. Daddy, you said she was awake. The door burst open. Leo and Mia ran in, bypassing the security guard, who looked helpless to stop them. They stopped at the foot of the bed, their eyes wide. Lorenzo's demeanor shifted instantly. The cold mask dropped. He wasn't the Don. He was a dad. He held up a hand. Gently. Andrew is still hurt. Leo walked up to the side of the bed. He was clutching the red superhero action figure, the one Andrew had picked up in the club. I brought you Turbo, Leo whispered, placing the toy on the bed next to her hand. He's tough. He helps you heal. Mia, the quiet one, moved to the other side. She reached out and touched Andrew's hand. Does it hurt? She asked softly. Andrew looked at the children. She looked at their innocence, so starkly contrasted against the violence of their world. Her anger at Lorenzo, at the mob, at the unfairness of her life, didn't disappear, but it softened. She smiled, weak but genuine. Only a little bit, sweetie. Turbo is helping already. Lorenzo watched from the foot of the bed. He saw the way Andrew looked at his children. It wasn't the fawning look of someone trying to gain favor. It was pure protective instinct. For 5 years since his wife died in childbirth, Lorenzo had felt nothing but cold duty. He loved his children, but his heart had been a fortress of ice. Watching this waitress, this woman who hated what he was, smile at his son, he felt a crack in the ice. Okay, you've seen her, Lorenzo said gently. Now go with Rocco. Andrew needs to sleep. Can we come back tomorrow? Leo asked. Lorenzo looked at Andrew. He was asking for permission. Andrew looked at the stern, dangerous man, and then at the hopeful boy. Yeah, she said softly. You can come back. The kids scampered out. The room fell silent again. My father, Andrew said, her voice hard again, was a good man. He didn't deserve to die scared. No, Lorenzo agreed. He didn't. If I stay here, Andrew said, I have conditions. I'm not your prisoner, and I'm not your servant. Name them. I want my debts paid. Not by you, I want to earn it. I want a job. A real job. Not waiting tables. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. You want to work for me? I want to work near you, so I know when to duck, she countered, and I want access to a phone. I have a life. Done, Lorenzo said, but you stay inside the gates until I find the leak. The leak? Lorenzo's face darkened. The shadow returned. Someone told the shooter exactly where we would be. Someone told them about the private party. That information never left my inner circle. He walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds of his estate, patrolled by armed guards. The traitor is close, Andrew, and until I find him, you are the only person in this house I know, for a fact isn't trying to kill me. He turned back to her. Rest now. Tomorrow, we go to war. Downstairs in the library, a phone buzzed. Stefano Lorenzo's second-in-command and his late wife's brother picked it up. He swirled a glass of scotch looking at the security monitor that showed Lorenzo leaving Andrew's room. She's alive, Stefano whispered into the phone. The plan failed. A distorted voice on the other end crackled. Then fix it. Moretti is distracted by the girl. Use that. Finish them both. Stefano hung up. He looked at the screen at the image of the woman who had ruined everything. An angel, he sneered. Let's see if angels can fly. November turned into December, bringing a biting frost to the Moretti estate. For Andrew, the transition from hospital bed to household fixture was gradual, confusing, and fraught with tension. She wasn't a guest, but she wasn't staff. She was something in between a variable Lorenzo couldn't solve and a presence the twins wouldn't let go of. True to his word, Lorenzo gave her a job. He didn't put her on the front lines, obviously. He put her in the library with a laptop and a stack of sanitized ledgers from his legitimate businesses, construction firms, waste management, shipping logistics. Find the fat, he had told her. My accountants are lazy. You ran a bakery on a shoestring budget. You know how to squeeze a penny. It was a test. Andrew knew it. But she threw herself into it because it kept her mind off the fact that there were armed men patrolling the garden below her window. It was late on a Tuesday. The house was quiet. Andrew was in the library, surrounded by spreadsheets. You're still up. She jumped. Lorenzo stood in the doorway. He had just returned from the city. He smelled of cold air, cigar smoke, and expensive scotch. He loosened his tie, walking over to the desk. I found a discrepancy, Andrew said, rubbing her temples. She turned the laptop screen toward him. In the supply chain for the waterfront project, you're paying for grade A steel, but the invoices from the transport company match the weight of grade C. Someone is skimming the difference and pocketing about 40 grand a month. Lorenzo leaned in his hand, resting on the back of her chair. The heat radiating from him was distracting. He scanned the numbers. His jaw tightened. That transport company is run by a cousin of mine, he muttered. Idiot. He looked down at Andrew. You have a good eye, Ms. Brooks. I hate thieves, she said simply. Rich or poor? Lorenzo chuckled a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Then you are in the wrong house, Andrew. We are all thieves here. You're honest about it, at least, she countered. He walked around the desk and poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter. He handed one to her. Drink. You look like you're about to collapse. Andrew took the glass. I'm fine. The stitches are out. I wasn't talking about the stitches. Lorenzo sat on the edge of the heavy oak desk, crossing his ankles. He looked at her over the rim of his glass. Leo asked me today if you were going to be his new mummy. Andrew choked on her brandy. She coughed, her face flushing crimson. He's just a child. He's confused. Is he? Lorenzo's eyes were intense, stripping away her defenses. You read to them every night, You fix their toys. You yell at Rocco when he swears in front of them. You act more like a mother than their own mother ever did." Andrew set her glass down. "That's not fair to her. She's gone." "She was beautiful," Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But she loved the lifestyle more than the life. She loved being Mrs. Moretti. She didn't love the messy parts, the danger, the children." He took a long sip. You faced a gun for them. You barely knew their names." "I did what anyone would do." "No," Lorenzo said softly. He reached out his rough thumb, tracing the line of her jaw. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to Andrew's toes. "Most people run. You stayed." For a moment, the air between them was so thick it was hard to breathe. Andrew looked up at him, seeing the loneliness behind the power. He was a king, but he was alone on his throne. She felt a magnetic pull, a dangerous desire to lean into his hand. "Lorenzo," she whispered. The moment was shattered by the sound of the door opening. Stefano walked in, smiling. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Interrupting?" Stefano asked, his gaze flicking between Lorenzo's hand and Andrew's face. Lorenzo pulled his hand back instantly, his mask of indifference sliding back into place. "Just reviewing the accounts. Andrew found a leak in the transport division." "Did she?" Stefano walked over, picking up the laptop. "Clever girl. Very clever." He looked at Andrew, and for a second, she saw something reptilian in his gaze. A flash of pure malice. "I'll handle the cousin," Stefano said to Lorenzo. "You should sleep. The gala is in 2 days. You need to be sharp." "The gala?" Lorenzo sighed. "A room full of sharks pretending to be dolphins." "It's necessary," Stefano insisted. "Rumors are circulating that you're weak, that the hit at the club rattled you. You need to show your face. And..." Stefano paused, looking at Andrew. "You should take her." "What?" Andrew and Lorenzo said in unison. "Think about it." Stefano smoothed his silk tie. "The mystery woman. The angel. Everyone is talking about her. If you bring her on your arm, it shows you have claimed her. It shows you aren't afraid. It's a power move." Lorenzo frowned. "It's dangerous." "I'll have 50 men on the perimeter," Stefano assured him. "She'll be safer there than she is here alone. If you leave her here, and the enemy strikes the house, knowing you're away." Lorenzo looked at Andrew. He didn't like it, but he saw the logic. In his world, perception was reality. "Andrew," Lorenzo asked, "it's your choice." Andrew looked at Stefano. She didn't trust him. There was something oily about the way he looked at her. But she looked at Lorenzo and she realized she didn't want to be left behind either. She felt safer when she could see him. "I'll go," she said. "But I don't have anything to wear." Stefano smiled, a predator showing teeth. "Leave that to me." The Grand Burnham Hotel was a monolith of gold leaf and marble in downtown Chicago. The annual Children's Trust Gala was technically a charity event, but everyone knew what it really was. The one night a year where the 5 families of the Midwest met on neutral ground without weapons, or at least without visible weapons. Andrew stood in front of the full-length mirror in the hotel suite, staring at a stranger. The dress Stefano had sent was breathtaking. It was a deep, blood-red velvet that hugged every curve of her body before cascading to the floor in a dramatic train. It was off the shoulder, exposing the faint healing scar near her collarbone. "You look..." Lorenzo's voice trailed off as he walked out of the bedroom. He stopped. Lorenzo was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He looked devastatingly handsome, but his eyes were glued to Andrew. "You look dangerous." He finished walking toward her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a diamond necklace, a simple solitaire that probably cost more than Andrew's entire life earnings. "I can't wear that," she protested. "It has a tracker in it," Lorenzo whispered, fastening it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her skin. "If we get separated, press the stone. Rocco will find you." He turned her around to face the mirror, his hands on her waist. They looked like a power couple, a king and his queen. "Stay by my side," Lorenzo commanded. "Do not talk to anyone about the business. Smile. Drink the champagne, but don't get it drunk." "I know how to work a room, Lorenzo," she said, adjusting his bow tie. "I was a waitress. I know how to deal with difficult customers." "These customers bite," he warned. They took the elevator down. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds and tension. As Lorenzo entered with Andrew on his arm, the room went quiet. Heads turned. Whispers started. "That's her. The waitress. She doesn't look like a waitress." Lorenzo guided her through the crowd, his grip on her arm firm and possessive. He introduced her simply as Andrew. No last name. No explanation. It drove them crazy. An hour passed. Andrew was doing well. She charmed a judge, deflected a question from a nosy reporter, and managed to avoid spilling anything on her $3,000 dress. Then Stefano appeared. "Lorenzo," he said, breathless. "There's a problem with the Don of the Detroit faction. He's demanding a sit-down. Now. In the penthouse." Lorenzo stiffened. "Now it's a party. He says it's about the shooting at the club. He says he has the name of the broker." Lorenzo looked at Andrew. He was torn. "Go," Andrew said, touching his arm. "I'll be fine. I'll stay with Rocco." Lorenzo scanned the room. Rocco was standing by the bar, looking like a gargoyle. "5 minutes," Lorenzo told Stefano. "Watch her." Lorenzo disappeared into the crowd with Stefano. Andrew let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She walked over to the bar, intending to stand next to Rocco. But as she approached, a waiter bumped into her, spilling a tray of drinks. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, miss," the waiter cried, creating a scene. Andrew stepped back to avoid the mess. In the confusion, a large group of laughing guests moved between her and the bar. When the crowd cleared, Rocco was gone. Panic flared in her chest. She reached up to press the diamond on her necklace. "I wouldn't do that, my dear." A hand gripped her elbow. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was a man she didn't recognize, older, with silver hair and a scar running through his eyebrow. But standing just behind him, looking smug, was Stefano. Andrew's blood ran cold. "Stefano, where is Lorenzo?" "Lorenzo is busy chasing ghosts," Stefano said smoothly. "I sent him to the penthouse. There is no meeting, just an empty room and a broken elevator." "Why?" Andrew demanded, trying to pull her arm free, but the silver-haired man's grip was like iron. "Because," Stefano whispered, leaning into her ear, "Lorenzo is weak. He let a woman distract him. He let emotions cloud his judgment. The family needs a strong leader, a leader who doesn't keep pets." The silver-haired man smiled. "Don Cavallo sends his regards." Stefano nodded to the man. "Take her out the back. Make it look like a kidnapping gone wrong. We'll blame the Detroit faction. Lorenzo will go to war. He'll get himself killed in the chaos. And I will pick up the pieces." "You traitor," Andrew hissed. "He trusts you. He's family." He's a relic, Stefano spat. Move, the silver-haired man growled, jamming a hard object into Andrew's ribs. A gun. They began to force her toward the kitchen service doors, the same exit waiters used. The irony wasn't lost on her. Andrew's mind raced. She was in heels. She was unarmed. She was being led to her execution. She looked around the ballroom. The music was loud. People were laughing. No one noticed the woman in the red dress being dragged away. Think, Andrew. Think. They pushed her through the swinging doors into the bustling kitchen. Chefs were shouting. Pans were clattering. Quiet, the gunman warned. One scream and I drop you here. They reached the loading dock. The cold night air hit Andrew's bare skin. A black van was waiting, engine running. Get in, Stefano ordered, standing by the door. Andrew looked at the van. She looked at Stefano. She remembered the file Rocco had shown her. She remembered her father. She remembered the twins. Heroes always get back up. Andrew didn't get in. She spun on her heel, not away from the gunman, but into him. She drove the sharp stiletto heel of her shoe down onto his instep with all the force of her desperation. The man grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. Andrew didn't wait. She grabbed a pot of boiling stock that a sous chef had just placed on a cooling rack near the door and heaved it. Scalding liquid splashed across the gunman and Stefano. Stefano screamed, clutching his arm. The gunman fired a shot, but it went wild, hitting the ceiling. The sound echoed like a cannon blast. Andrew ran. She didn't run toward the street. She ran back into the hotel kitchen. "Help, gun!" she screamed at the top of her lungs, flipping a metal prep table behind her as she ran. Stefano was screaming behind her. "Kill her! Don't let her get back to the ballroom!" Andrew burst through the double doors back into the gala. She was panting, her hair wild, the red dress torn at the hem. The music stopped. The room froze. At the top of the grand staircase, Lorenzo Moretti had just kicked open the doors, having realized the penthouse was a trap. He stood there, scanning the room, his face a mask of absolute terror. He saw her. He saw the red dress. He saw the terror in her eyes. And then he saw Stefano and the gunman burst out of the kitchen, behind her weapons drawn. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared, vaulting over the balcony railing. Andrew dropped to the floor, just as the ballroom erupted into a war zone. The ballroom of the Grand Burnham dissolved into madness. Crystal chandeliers shattered as stray bullets clipped their chains, raining glass down on the screaming elite of Chicago. Andrew was pressed flat against the polished floor, her hands over her head. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and expensive perfume. Lorenzo hit the ground, rolling. He didn't have a gun. Guests were searched at the door. But Lorenzo Moretti was never truly unarmed. As he landed, he grabbed a silver steak knife from a fallen table setting. Stefano's gunman aimed at Andrew, but before he could pull the trigger, a massive shape tackled him from the side. It was Rocco. The head of security had dragged himself out of the service closet, where he'd been ambushed, bleeding from a gash on his head, and barreled into the shooter like a freight train. That left Stefano. The traitorous brother-in-law stood amidst the chaos, a pistol in his shaking hand. He looked at Lorenzo, who was rising from the floor 5 meters away. "It should have been me," Stefano screamed, his voice cracking. "I ran the numbers, I kept the peace while you played grieving widower. I deserved the chair." Lorenzo didn't scream. He didn't run. He walked. He walked straight toward the gun, his eyes burning with a cold, white-hot fury that terrified Stefano more than any weapon could. Stefano fired. The bullet grazed Lorenzo's arm, tearing through the tuxedo jacket, but Lorenzo didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "You betrayed my children." Lorenzo said, his voice low, audible, only because the room had fallen into a terrified hush as the guests realized the personal nature of the duel. Stefano fired again. Click. Jammed. Stefano frantically tried to clear the chamber, but it was too late. Lorenzo was on him. Lorenzo didn't use the knife. He dropped it. He grabbed Stefano by the lapels of his jacket and slammed him backward into a stone pillar. The impact knocked the wind out of the smaller man. "I gave you everything," Lorenzo whispered, his face inches from Stefano's. "I made you family." "Family is weak." Stefano spat blood on his teeth. "No," Lorenzo said, tightening his grip. "Family is the only thing that matters, and you just lost yours." Lorenzo didn't kill him. Not there. Not in front of the witnesses. He struck Stefano once, a precise, devastating blow to the temple that dropped him unconscious instantly. Silence stretched across the ballroom. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Lorenzo turned. He didn't look at his fallen enemy. He looked for the red dress. "Andrew!" She was pushing herself up from the floor, shaking her dress stained with wine and glass shards. She looked at him, bruised, bleeding, and terrifying, and she ran to him. Lorenzo caught her, crushing her against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, verifying she was real. She was warm. She was alive. "I've got you," he murmured into her ear. "I've got you. It's over." Rocco limped over, dragging the unconscious gunman. "Boss, cops are 2 minutes out. We need to vanish." Lorenzo nodded. He scooped Andrew up into his arms just as he had that night in the club. But this time, she wasn't a stranger. She was his life. "Let's go home," he said. Christmas Eve at the Moretti estate was usually a somber affair. Not this year. The great hall was filled with laughter. A 12-foot tree stood in the center, decorated with ornaments that were decidedly not designer hand-painted stars and macaroni angels made by Leo and Mia. Andrew sat by the fire, watching the twins tear into a mountain of presents. She wore a simple cream sweater and jeans, her hair loose. She looked healthy, happy, and at peace. She was no longer the waitress. She was the manager of the Moretti Foundation, overseeing legitimate charities across the state. She had paid off her father's debts with her first paycheck. Lorenzo walked in, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He handed one to her, sat on the rug beside her, disregarding his expensive trousers. "Stefano talked," Lorenzo said quietly. "Before he went away. The Romanos are dismantling. The threat is gone." Andrew took a sip of the cocoa. "Good. I don't want the kids looking over their shoulders." "Neither do I." Lorenzo reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, not the one from the gala. This one was old, worn leather. The room seemed to quiet down. Leo and Mia stopped ripping paper and looked over, their eyes wide. "Daddy's doing it," Leo whispered loudly to Mia. Andrew looked from the kids to Lorenzo. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lorenzo opened the box. Inside sat a ring that didn't look like a mob wife's ring. It was a vintage piece, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Classy. Understated. "You saved my children," Lorenzo said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life. You saved my soul. He took her hand. I don't need a waitress. I don't need a partner. I need you. I need the woman who isn't afraid of the dark because she carries her own light. He looked into her hazel eyes. Andrew Brooks, will you marry me? Will you be the mother these kids deserve and the wife I don't deserve? Andrew looked at the ring. She looked at the scars on Lorenzo's hands. She looked at the two hopeful children holding their breath by the Christmas tree. She thought about the coffee shop, the rain, the fear, the bullets. She would go through it all again. Every second of it. Just to get to this moment. She smiled, and it was the brightest thing in the room. Ask me again, she teased, tears spilling over. Lorenzo laughed, a sound of pure joy. Will you marry us? Yes, Andrew whispered. Yes, I'll marry all of you. Lorenzo slid the ring onto her finger. He kissed her deep and passionate, sealing a pact that was stronger than blood, stronger than money, and stronger than bullets. From the corner of the room, Leo threw his hands up. Finally. Can we eat the cake now? Andrew broke the kiss, laughing against Lorenzo's lips. Yes, Leo. Let's eat cake. Outside, the snow fell softly on Chicago, covering the grime, covering the blood, leaving everything white and new. The angel of the underworld had finally found her wings, and the devil had found his heart. And for the first time in the history of the Moretti family, there was peace. And that is the story of Andrew and Lorenzo. It started with a spilled drink and a split-second choice, and ended with a love that burned down an empire. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you saw a gun pointed at a stranger, would you have the courage to jump? Or do we only find out who we really are when the trigger is pulled? If this story had you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor. Hit that like button. So we know you want more true crime, romance, dramas like this one. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We release new stories every Tuesday and Friday, and trust me, the next one involves a runaway bride and a cartel pilot. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love.